you all know that strategy is important, especially when you're facing a narcissistic ex, because they are going to use every trick in the book, and you need to be not only prepared for that, but have a plan. How are you going to approach this? How are you going to use their behavior against them and as part of your strategy? And so that is what this video is going to talk to you about, is how do you do this before you even set foot inside of a courtroom? So most people think that strategy starts in the courtroom itself. But usually by the time you get there, professionals have already formed an opinion. That's why you need to lay the strategic groundwork before you head into court, because it's your chance to shape the lens through which everyone else sees your case. So they're under pressure. We've all heard about the amount of delays there are in family court. When you've been in family court yourself, you've waited longer, you've had your court date cancelled at the last minute, the wait to actually get your first appointment, that all exists, and it's creating pressure on the system. And what they tend to do to kind of manage that overwhelm is that they will subconsciously simplify your case by assigning roles early on. So they might read whatever that's been submitted and go, okay, protective parent, abuser, safe, unstable, victim, perpetrator. Then black and white the case into roles, and whichever role you are assigned, that is what they think of you before they even met you, before they've really heard anything from you other than the written evidence. And that is why it's so important to get your structure correct, using your tone, your timing, and your paper trail. So if you're waiting for your court hearing to start before you begin getting your strategy ready, then you are already behind. In this video, we're going to look at what is real strategy and showing you how to get started as soon as possible. So by the time you get to court, CAFCAS, social workers, solicitors, maybe even the judge, they've all formed those impressions. They've read through text messages that you've sent to one another. They've read through school reports. They've read through your statements. They've seen a variety of things, and they've formed that simplified version of who is which role within this case. So the court is going to react to those narratives, and obviously your ex is going to play into that. They're a really good storyteller. You know that. You're in a relationship with them. You know how good a storyteller it was. You believe what they told you, and that's why you ended up in a relationship. And why we're here is because they're so good at what they do. Professionals, because of that pressure, because of their lack of training and their lack of understanding, they buy the best storyteller's version. And you're not telling a story, you're telling your truth, you're telling your life. And so it's different. And your ex has been preparing for this their whole life. They've always felt that they need to protect themselves. They're always on guard. So they've been planting this seed, this story around other people for a long, long time, ready to press the switch when you ended up separating and going to court. And so you are a long way behind. And this is why it's so important to get your strategy right as soon as possible to make sure that their narrative doesn't get too far ahead. So what they're reacting to, the core, is things that they built in as part of the process. So statements, emails, safeguarding concerns, and any professional reports that have been submitted as well. They are assigning roles every time they read through these things. And so this is that subconscious bias that they are playing out. They aren't necessarily looking at it from an open-minded, objective perspective. They have assigned a role. So everything that you do is look through at that lens, and everything your ex has done is look through that lens of whatever role that they have been assigned or you have been assigned. So think of your case as a story. The court itself is not walking in until chapter 5, when the groundwork has already been played, it's been told. So chapters 1 to 4, your life, your relationship, the emails, the statements, all of that, they don't have access to all of it. They're walking in late. They are walking in when they're only seeing one side of it. So maybe they're walking in at a point where you're really angry and frustrated because you've just come out of it, but they haven't got the backstory. I describe it as they don't see the video camera footage, they're just seeing a still. And that still doesn't tell the whole picture, but that's what they're working with. Your job is to create the rest of that story for them. But it's also about being aware of, before you get into court, how are you playing into those roles? So every message, every email, every interaction, every written statement is a chance for you to show your consistency, to show that you are regulated, that your nervous system isn't reactive, but it is instead calm, and you're able to be reasonable and objective, and you are able to manage your emotions in a very difficult and volatile environment, that you're able to subtly highlight manipulation or risk or lack of cooperation without naming it. So start treating every single communication from the second you exit the relationship, in my advice, as if a judge would read it. Now, I also add to this as well, as if your children were reading it, because your ex is likely to be sharing stuff with them. So be mindful of, how do I want to come across to my children as well as to the judge? So just every communication, be mindful of it being witnessed and observed by someone else. Have a clear, calm response. Use the bits, use the brief, informative, friendly, and firm way to communicate. It shifts that perception from someone who is caught in the emotion of the relationship, where you're sparring essentially through your text messages or through your emails or WhatsApps or whatever, to someone who you are able to separate yourself from it. You're not being rude. You're not being accusatory. You are just being brief, informative, firm, and friendly. Because again, you need to look civil. After all, especially when there's children involved, the children are at the center of this, and the court wants to see that you are able to manage some elements of that. So avoid over explaining, emotional venting, or long reactive texts. They might make you feel better in the moment, but they could massively impact your credibility in the long run. So regulate yourself first before you respond. Take as long as is possible. You don't have to respond immediately, even if they tell you it's urgent. It may well not be. So take a moment to regulate yourself, get yourself back in your body, identify what your trauma response is. So again, do the quiz on a self-sabotage pattern assessment to identify what your natural trauma response is, so that you can identify, okay, I'm going into flight mode. This one is, or I'm going into fight mode and I'm about to send a massive long email. I'm going to go at them. I need to hold myself back. There's some techniques and the follow on from that assessment that will help you to just calm your nervous system down again. It's about how you engage with the professionals. So the first impressions are really, really important, especially in defining this role. Now, I see it all the time. Parents are so anxious and so desperate to be heard. Their kids are hurting. They've been hurt. So they're coming in and they're full of all this. I want to tell them this. I want to tell them all this evidence. I've got so much to share, that they've done this, they've done that, they've done the other. But again, it's about taking a step back, considering how you would present. And in some of my training, I talk about, how would you look to an outsider? How would this role look like to the outside? Not someone who understands it, not someone who's lived it, but someone who didn't. Someone who's got no real understanding. What would be the stereotypical things that they might look for that they would present in that way? Either be the role that you want to be, or don't be the role that you're assigned or you think you're about to be assigned. Be very conscious in terms of your tone of your voice when you're speaking to them. I speed up and I get louder when I get excited or if I'm frustrated, and that can come across as being aggressive. For example, someone might feel, hang on a minute, you're attacking me here. And if they're labeling you as aggressive, then it's like A plus B equals C. You are aggressive. So it's just being mindful of the way your trauma impacts your communication as well. Be the safe one. Use child-focused language. Make sure you are constantly focused on the impact that any behavior might be having or had on them, and ask curious questions rather than making accusations. So rather than, yes, but they've done this, say, okay, so how would you expect someone to behave who done X, Y, or Z? Shift it slightly into a question, because again, you put the emphasis on them then to reframe this and to look at it in a slightly different way. You're challenging their critical thinking to take a different look at this case. And professionals are always swayed more about how you speak than what you say. The way I say it is that people believe the story more if they believe the storyteller. When you are highly traumatized and you are reacting from your trauma response, your credibility is less. So they're not going to believe your story because they don't necessarily believe you as a storyteller. The final point is about framing the narrative. So you've got to choose your lens. If this is the story, how do you want the audience to view this? So describe how you want to be perceived. If you want to be seen as being calm, you want to be seen safe, you want to be seen as nurturing, what does that look like? And there's a whole exercise of this in transforming your alienation story around the language that you can use in your statements and how you can present that way. Do you want to be seen as being a co-parent? Do you want to be seen as being a trauma-aware person? Do you want to be seen as someone who is regulated? How would that show up? And be all of those things. On the other side, how would someone who is abusive, aggressive, controlling, how would they show up? Are you doing any of those things and taking a really honest look at yourself with those? And just shifting, just being mindful of that and presenting as the person you want them to see you as, not as that traumatized version of yourself. I find as well that the more you try and tell someone the truth and they've kind of dug their heels in and they've got a different view, the more they shut down and the more that, you sound like you are crazy. And again, I use that word very, very aware of the connotations of that. But I use the ghost analogy all the time, that if you try and tell someone that you've seen a ghost, the more you try and tell them and they haven't seen it and they don't believe in ghosts, the crazier they think you are. And that's what this situation does, because your ex is playing their role perfectly because they've been playing it for years and they are absolutely brilliant actors. So subtle language shifts, such as rather than they're abusive and controlling, I've been trying to manage a very controlling dynamic in a way that keeps our child emotionally safe. It's a shift from it's about me and him to this is the dynamic, and this is what I've been trying to do to protect the child. It's child-focused language. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is be mindful of the different roles before you step into court, before you get in front of a judge. Know, how is your ex going to paint you? They're going to paint you as being the problem. And how is that going to be? Are they going to call you an alcoholic? Are they going to call you mentally unstable? Are they going to call you emotionally abusive? Are they going to call you angry, aggressive? Whatever it is, and again, you can go through their statements or just things that they've said to you in text messages. Go through it and pull out all the words that they've described you. Then, my advice, get a thesaurus. And what's the opposite? What is the opposite of all of those things? If they're describing you as aggressive, what's the opposite of that? One, use that kind of language, but two, present in that way. These are really powerful ways to stop the roles from being set into stone before you end up in court. And that is how you set a solid strategy in the early start and the early part of your case that prevents them from taking complete control of the narrative. I will share the tools that I've discussed in the description. And if you have any questions, please do drop them in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. And check out getcourtready.co.uk for any resources regarding family court against someone with this personality type. Take care.